20 years ago, we all watched Leonardo DiCaprio stumble upon the world's most remote secret beach. 2 decades later, it looked like this. 3,000 visitors a day jamming in to Instagram the secret paradise of Maya Bay for themselves. Officials ended up shutting it down completely in 2018 to let nature recover. Now it looks like this again. But for places that didn't have the political will to clamp down on tourism, our COVID-19 response has done it for them. Because of lockdowns and travel restrictions, many cities and parks are now more inviting and authentic than they've been in over 50 years.
I feel pretty guilty having had this place largely to myself for most of the day. I'm sure Yosemite is exactly the kind of place many of you would like to storm out of your homes and go enjoy right now.
Will we learn from the great pause or great realization, some are calling it? Or will that temptation to experience improved nature and culture fuel its quick demise all over again?
But now people are asking themselves, when will the tourists be back?
Without a clear plan to limit visitors, the world looks set to repeat past mistakes and let tourists rush back and take over. So it seemed like a good time to speak with 2 directors of tourism from Bhutan and Amsterdam, who are making a concerted effort to put locals and the environment first. Before I get to the interviews, it seems worth mentioning that there aren't many places left to discover. There haven't been for ages. So instead, travelers are addicted to the buzzword promises of secret, hidden, untouched, undiscovered places. And no one knows this better than travel influencers and the media. Just look at this guy.
Then you will experience those things where you don't have to deal with huge crowds.
So nobody knows about it except for the 357,000 people who just watched this video?
Looking for the next Iceland? We've got you covered.
The travel media loves selling off these fragile cultural gems that don't belong to them to boost their clicks. Even National Geographic got in on the action. Travelers just can't resist these buzzwords. It's like giving raw meat to lions. The temptation for secret places and elusive authenticity feels just like too much for us to resist, even though we know our unregulated presence kills the very thing we so desperately want to experience. Authenticity is this indescribable magic ingredient. It's what makes a place feel real. And generally, a large part of what makes it feel real is seeing the culture in action, not just seeing a bunch of other tourists all trying to see the culture in action. Let's say that the culture is like this piece of cake, and the tourism is the layer of frosting on top. The frosting only really works well if it has cake underneath. It needs a foundation. Destinations will say that tourists still show up even when places are packed with tourists. Yes, that's true. And there are people, like this guy, who will eat jars of pure frosting without a cake in sight. But is that who you really want to visit you? Is this what you want your destination to become? It's up to the destination to protect the experience because no one else will. It caught my attention 20 years ago when CBS correspondent Morley Safer traveled to the Kingdom of Bhutan to take a look at their brave new outlook on tourism.
Gross national happiness. Any American politician or bureaucrat would be laughed off the platform trying to sell that one. But here it is quite simply the goal and purpose of responsible government. And though it has the world's highest unconquered peaks, it banned mountaineering.
The herdsmen who lived on the base of these mountains, who grazed their yaks on the base of those mountains, immediately petitioned the government, saying that what's going on? These mountains are sacred. And the government considered that and decided very consciously that the sentiments of these people was more important than the profits of tourism.
In all, only 6,000 tourists are allowed to enter the country each year, and they are charged a steep price for the privilege.
We follow a policy of high value, low volume tourism, and it has served us well.
Things have changed a bit in the last 20 years. They still practice gross national happiness, high-yield, low-volume tourism, but instead of 6,000 visitors, they have 65,000 annual international visitors, plus 200,000 more tourists each year from India, Bangladesh, and the Maldives who pay considerably less. And there's currently no limit. In other words, it's getting crowded in some spots.
Are you also keeping a very close eye on carrying capacity at the various popular sites, and as you want to grow? Is this something you're measuring very closely?
No, this is something very important. While we may not have been able to implement this, but something that is very important, and we are actually working on this, like the overcrowding of the tourist sites and all. So this is something that, thank you very much. I mean, we really work on this, because when we talk about giving an exclusive experience, means basically we have to avoid the crowd. We feel that with a better now infrastructure and also making it 12 months, we feel that maybe based on our carrying capacity, the number can still go high. Maybe around by 2023, in another 4 to 5 years, we can increase to at the most maybe about 400,000, 500,000 per year.
What happens if you have a stakeholder, a local entrepreneur, who comes to you and says, we want to put up a race car track out here. We want to have go-kart racing or skydiving or crazy adventure tourist stuff. Do you allow it? Is it a free market, or does it come to a committee who decides if it's part of your brand or not?
Definitely is not free. There will be committee, there will be certain procedure. I mean, one is the framework of gross national happiness development philosophy. So any new projects or policies that comes in our country, it has to pass through this gross national happiness screening test.
Also, just to clear things up, that base rate of $250 per day is not a visitor's fee, but $65 of that is. The other $185 is applied to the cost of hotel, food, snacks, transportation, plus the guide who is required to follow all groups. That rate covers a 3-star experience. And there are now a number of luxury hotels, including Six Senses and other independents, so visitors can easily spend up to $1,000 a day if they decide to upgrade. It may have taken decades, but other places are now starting to jump on board, including Amsterdam.
Has Corona given you a chance to reset tourism to some degree?
Well, I think that the weird situation that we're in right now is that we experience how once cities were, places where people live together and work together, period. Way before the whole tourism industry started. And I think that is a very valuable lesson that we have to take into consideration, that cities are made by people that wanted to live together and work together. And if they did really well, they attracted visitors. Nobody likes big groups that puke and litter and all other horrible things. Nobody likes in their hometown to be annoyed by overcrowdedness if you want to go to your work or whatever. Nobody likes that your house become unaffordable because they're too much used for the visitor economy. So there are just some things that are not acceptable. If you say we're a city where we live, where we work, and where we want to welcome visitors that add value to our destination for our local people.
What things have you put in place to stop them from coming in those numbers?
Well, what we try to do, if you say do not come, the word not doesn't work most of the time. So I think that can have a negative effect. What we did is we shifted totally our focus and said, like I've been pointed out before, in first a city and a destination, but we do not talk about destinations because we're so much focused on residents as well. But a place in first is a place to live, work, and to welcome people that add value instead of adding people to the max. If you look at the economic system, we also say don't focus on this endless growth. The visitor economy should put economy in service of life again.
Yeah.
And that is where we start to have the whole discussion with the cultural institutions, with the hotel partners, with the government, that we say we really have to focus first on people, then on planet, and then not on profit, but on prosperity.
Mm-hmm.
So if we look at people, we should go back and say like, okay, what does this industry add for our residents? What does the industry give in the prosperity to our residents? If we look at the planet, we have to accept what the ecological boundaries are and see how we can invest in sustainable consumption, sustainable mobility, renewable energy, waste management, etc. And we have to focus on this prosperity concept. Because in the long run, we want to take care that this city is a great destination to live, to work, and to visit, also for the coming up generations.
Clearly, these destination leaders have a holistic approach to tourism, and it was a sincere pleasure to speak with both. But I have to admit, I was a bit surprised to see them headed in slightly different directions. Amsterdam is leaning more towards Bhutan value over volume visitor approach, and Bhutan is looking to increase volume while using Amsterdam's strategy of spreading visitors out. While both were concerned with a quality experience and avoiding overcrowding, neither were in the process of putting visitor limits in place, nor creating the tools to make that happen. Oddly, one of the best examples of that is in the Philippines, where otherwise polemic autocrat Duterte closed Boracay Island, declaring it, and this is a quote, a state of calamity in 2018. They completely shut it down, cleaned it up, and conducted a carrying capacity assessment, which discovered they can produce only 23 million liters of drinking water per day and handle 18 million liters of wastewater and 164 cubic meters of solid waste. So 15,000 fewer people can live on the island. And that means they can only handle 19,215 visitors at once, which means they have too many small hotels, 181 too many to be precise. Without careful calculations like these, every destination is going to eventually hit the wall, whether it's drinking water, parking spots, or crowds on the walking street.